And this report didn't make it into the reportage by The Guardian, Der Spiegel, or New York Times, simply because a lot of stuff happened. And there wasn't time to understand what happened in this event. Really unusual event with so many people killed, most of them by an AC-130 gunship. But there wasn't time to understand. So we have made all these events easier for everyone to understand, because those major media players simply do not have the economic power and time to get through material like this. We effectively only revealed in those news stories a sample of what is occurring. If we look to see why most press in countries that are not full of fear like in the United States, but outside the United States, why most press don't report this sort of information, this is why. This is what the report looks like. At 024Z, CJSOTF requested a medvac for 2 ANA, etc. So it seems to be unreadable. I can read this, but any military non-specialist can't read this. But we have written a system here. You see, expand acronyms. And, okay, now you have an understanding of what this is like. It's almost a decryption operation where we go from military acronyms to something that people can read straight away. And in pursuing this particular story, which is a complex event and a troubling one, we see that it was part of a Canadian-led task force in Operation Medusa, which, if you look at news reports, you look at statements by NATO at the time, where they bragged that this killed about 1,000 people during that week of operations. And researching it, we came to a Canadian military website which has recently put up a history of Operation Medusa. It looks like attempting to presage a book that is coming out in September on this operation. And on that website, there's an interview with a Canadian journalist, Graham Smith, who works for the Daily Mail. And I think this interview really helps you understand why so little information, quality information, is coming out from embedded reporters. Graham Smith was embedded in Operation Medusa, and we can see.
My name's Graham Smith. I'm a reporter for the Globe and Mail. In September 2006, I had one of the most intense experiences of my life. I was on the front lines of something called Operation Medusa. It was a big Canadian offensive against the Taliban, who were massed outside of Kandahar city. They were the Taliban were digging trenches and intimidating locals, and the Canadians decided to sweep in there in big numbers and force them out. And I was traveling with a platoon that called themselves the Nomads. These were guys who had been sent all over, sort of a 50,000 square kilometer box out to the very edges of Kandahar city. And so they were moving around all the time. They were never sleeping in the same place twice. And they had even made up these little patches for the uniforms that said Nomads on them. The Nomads took me in, and they sort of made me one of them. I spent what was originally supposed to be just a 2 or 3 day embed with them, stretched out into 2 weeks. I didn't have a change of underwear, I didn't have a change of shirt. I remember showering in my clothes, washing first the clothes on my body and then stripping the clothes off and washing my body. And that was just using a bucket as a shower. And it was an intense experience. I slept in my flak jacket a lot of nights. We were under fire together. We had RPGs whistling in. One time I was standing around behind the troop carrier, and we were just sort of relaxing. We were in a down moment, and I think some guys had coffee out, and were standing around, and I heard a loud clap beside my right ear. It was like someone had snuck up behind me and sort of played a prank by clapping beside my ear. And I turned around to say, hey, that's not really funny, that was kind of loud. And all of the soldiers were lying on the ground because they know what to do when an incoming sniper round comes in. And I didn't because it was my first time under fire. So I threw myself to the ground as well. They had sort of made me one of them, and so they gave me a little nomad's patch that I attached to my flak jacket. And, you know, as a journalist, you try to avoid drinking the Kool-Aid, but I did feel a sense of belonging with those guys.
So I think that confession made to the Canadian military for one of their own internal documentation projects really does sum up why embedded reporting has been so effective in confining the truth. We see people like Graham Smith here, not wanting to pick him out in particular merely because he's an example. Essentially writers entering into an environment where they are amongst men and feel extraordinary to me that having to wash the clothes on their body while they're wearing them is some kind of profound experience, and that the support by the mutual defence of the troops with him and his adoption by people who have more physical power than writers normally have leads him to a sense of belonging. And of course, once one has a sense of belonging, then it is hard to be objective.